Hare Krishna. Admitting our weaknesses doesn't make us weak. Acquiescing to them does. Sometimes when we have weaknesses, we want to conceal them. And we think that if people come to know our weaknesses, they will think that we are weak and they will make fun of us, they will exploit us. And that's why we try to conceal our weaknesses. Now, yes, at one level, we don't, we live in a world which is like a battlefield, and in this battlefield we have to fight, and there are sometimes people who are hostile to us. If they come to know our weaknesses, then we will become, they may exploit us. But at the same time, while we need a position of strength to fight against enemies, that position of strength doesn't come just by a posture of strength. That means just by creating an illusion that we are very strong, by the bluff and bravado that we are very strong, we don't automatically become strong. We also need to do whatever it takes to become strong. And if we have weaknesses, then we often need help and assistance in dealing with those weaknesses. So just as if a person is sick, then yes, if some important work is to be done, if a person is sick and then that person has to give a public speech or has to attend an important meeting, person may not go with a sorry face, will try to maybe take some pain medicine or whatever and try to present oneself as well as possible in that public appearance. But after that is done, that cannot be sustained continuously. That person also has to take medicines by which the disease can be cured. So similarly, we may have some weaknesses, we may have lust, we may have anger, greed, we may have anger. And when these attack us, at that time, we naturally feel these attackers, we may try to conceal their attacks, conceal our weaknesses for the sake of doing some things in the world. But we also need to have some people who are like our guides, who help us to deal with the weaknesses. And with our spiritual mentors, consulting our spiritual mentors and taking guidance from them, and for that purpose admitting our weaknesses to them, it doesn't make us weak. Just as going to a doctor and telling about our sickness does not make us sick. The sickness is already there, so because of the weaknesses we are already weak. But in the just as the now in the case of sicknesses, usually the sickness goes on, attacks on its own and grows on its own. In the case of our weaknesses, say if it is lust or anger or greed or whatever, what makes us weak is not just the presence of those faults, those anarthas, those inner enemies, but it is indulgence in them. It is pandering to them, succumbing to them. So when we acquiesce to our weaknesses, that means, as I feel angry, so I'll explode. I feel lusty, so I will indulge. No. Rather than that, if we go to some trustworthy spiritual guide and admit our weakness and thereby try to resolve that weakness, that is what will make us strong. So Arjuna at the start of the Bhagavad Gita was overcome by the weakness of illusion, and because of that weakness of illusion, he just did not know what to do. He became so weak that is described in the Bhagavad Gita's last verse of the first chapter, that he visrujya sasharam chapam shokasam vigna manasaha, that he just put aside his bow. Visrujya sasharam chapam, visrujya, he put aside his bow, sasharam chapam, his bow and arrow he put aside and sat down on the throne. Shokasam vigna manasaha, becoming completely covered by misery, he just put aside his bow and arrow. So this is how we become bound in material existence, because we all have weaknesses, and if we let our weaknesses weaken us, then we become overwhelmed. Now Arjuna did not just put aside a facade, but put on a facade to try to deal with his weakness, but he admitted it to Krishna. And he said, Karpanya dosho pahata svabhava pruchhami tvam dharma sammoda cheta yashreyasyan nishchitam bruhitan me shishyasteham shadhimam tvam prapannam. Oh Krishna, please help me to overcome the illusions. I have become overcome by my miserly weakness. Please guide me as to how I can overcome it. So when Arjuna went to Krishna as a patient goes to a doctor, Krishna enlightened him and freed him from the weaknesses. And by the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna has got his bow raised and is ready to fight. So rather than trying to conceal and cover up our weaknesses, we should try to cure the weaknesses, and that is by taking the spiritual treatment offered by Krishna and his representatives or spiritual mentors according to the treatment of Bhakti Yoga. Then while the weaknesses are present, their guidance will ensure that the weaknesses don't make us further weaker than what we are. And their guidance will also help us to gain spiritual strength by which we can combat and eventually conquer the weaknesses. Thank you. Hare Krishna.